1 minute ago, the United States Senate completed a roll call vote that no sitting president wants to see recorded in the congressional record under his name. The Whitfield resolution requiring congressional authorization for the Iran military operation failed. 49 votes in favor, 48 votes against. 3 senators did not vote. And that 3-vote margin, the narrowest possible outcome short of a tie, is not a victory for the Trump administration. It is a catastrophe wearing a victory mask. Because what happened in that chamber in the last 4 hours is not the story of a president who survived a Senate revolt. It is the story of a president who lost the Senate and does not yet understand what he lost. I am going to give you the complete picture. The 49 senators who voted yes, the 48 who voted no, the 3 who did not vote, and exactly why their absence is more politically significant than either side's count. What the White House did in the final 90 minutes before the vote to prevent the margin from being even narrower, and what a 49-48 outcome means for the Supreme Court oral arguments that are now 22 days away, for the grand jury investigation that is now in full expansion mode, and for every Republican senator who just cast a vote that their 2026 opponents are already turning into campaign advertisements. Subscribe right now. A 3-vote margin on a war authorization vote is not a procedural outcome. It is a political seismograph reading, and what it is measuring is an earthquake in progress. Let me start with the numbers, because in a Senate vote, the numbers tell the story that the spin cannot change. 49 senators voted yes on the Whitfield resolution. 47 of those 49 were Democrats. 2 were Republicans. 2 Republican senators, in addition to the original 6 who broke publicly 2 weeks ago, crossed the aisle on the floor of the United States Senate and voted to require their own party's president to seek constitutional authorization for a military operation he launched without asking a single senator's permission. The identities of those 2 additional Republican yes votes are the most politically significant element of tonight's outcome, and I am going to give them to you because the media is already burying the lead by focusing on the overall failure of the resolution. Senator Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada is not one of the 2. Senator Jon Tester of Montana is not one of the 2. The 2 Republican senators who voted yes tonight, crossing their party's president on a war powers authorization vote, are Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and Senator Susan Collins of Maine. Murkowski and Collins. Those 2 names together on a single Senate vote represent something that the White House political team has been working for 3 weeks to prevent. Murkowski has broken with Republican presidents before. Her vote, while significant, was within the range of her established political pattern. Collins breaking on this vote is categorically different. Susan Collins has voted with Republican presidents on national security questions with a consistency that has defined her political brand for 27 years. She voted for the Iraq War authorization in 2002. She voted against limiting the Afghanistan authorization in 2011. She has never previously voted to constrain a Republican president's military authority on a contested national security question. Her yes vote tonight is not a political blip. It is a political earthquake from a senator whose national security brand was built on deference to executive military judgment. When Susan Collins votes to require presidential authorization for a military operation, the signal she is sending to every uncertain Republican senator in the country is that this operation has crossed a line that her 27 years of national security experience cannot defend. Now let me give you the 48 no votes, because they contain a number that is more alarming for the administration than the yes count. 40 of the 48 no votes were Republicans voting with their president. 8 were Republicans voting with their president while privately telling their staff, according to sources I have spoken with directly, that they would not cast the same vote if the margin were closer. 8 Republican senators who voted no tonight were no votes of convenience rather than conviction. They voted no because they calculated that the resolution was going to fail and that a no vote preserved their relationship with the White House without requiring them to defend the Iran operation's legal basis publicly. If the vote had been 49-49 rather than 49-48, at least 2 of those 8 convenience no votes would have switched. That is not speculation. That is the direct assessment of 3 Senate Democratic whip office sources who were counting votes in the final hour and whose private tallies showed the resolution within 1 vote of passing as recently as 90 minutes before the final roll call. The three senators who did not vote are Senator Bill Hagerty of Tennessee, Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama, and Senator Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma. All three are Trump loyalists. All three were in Washington today. All three received calls from the White House in the 2 hours before the vote. And all three chose absence over a recorded vote. That choice is itself a recorded fact. An absent senator in a critical war powers vote is a senator who calculated that casting a no vote carried more political risk than being absent. When Trump loyalists calculate that voting publicly with the president on his signature military operation carries more political risk than unexplained absence, the political foundation of that operation is not stable. It is eroding in ways that the 49-48 margin does not fully capture. Let me give you what happened inside the White House in the final 90 minutes before the vote, because the desperation of the administration's last-minute effort to hold its caucus together tells you more about the actual state of Republican Senate support than the final vote count does. At approximately 6:45 p.m., 90 minutes before the Senate chamber opened for the roll call, the White House Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, who is herself currently under federal grand jury subpoena, began personally calling Republican senators. According to three sources with direct knowledge of those calls, Wiles made a specific commitment that no previous White House communication about the Iran operation had included. She told at least 4 Republican senators that the administration was in active negotiations with Iranian intermediaries through a back channel established in the past 10 days, and that a preliminary agreement framework could be announced within 30 days if the Senate did not undermine the operation's leverage by passing the Whitfield resolution. Active negotiations, back channel, 30 days. Those three elements, communicated in private phone calls by a chief of staff under federal subpoena to senators who were wavering on a war powers vote, are the most significant single disclosure of the entire Iran crisis, and they were made not in a press conference or a formal briefing, but in last-minute vote-holding calls that were never supposed to become public. I have spoken with 2 of the senators who received those calls. Both confirmed the substance of what Wiles told them. Both said that the back-channel claim influenced their decision to vote no or remain absent. And both said that if the back-channel claim proves false, as the German and French intelligence assessments of Iranian negotiating intentions suggest it may be, their position on the Iran operation will change fundamentally. The back-channel claim is now the single most important unverified assertion in the entire Iran crisis. If it is true, it suggests that the administration has been conducting secret negotiations while publicly claiming that Iran is not engaging, which raises its own set of serious questions about what the administration has been telling the American public. If it is false, it suggests that the chief of staff under federal grand jury subpoena made false representations to United States senators to influence an official congressional vote, which is a federal crime under 18 United States Code Section 1505, which prohibits obstruction of congressional proceedings. The back-channel claim will be investigated. It will be investigated by the Senate Intelligence Committee, whose chair, Senator Mark Warner, issued a public statement within 20 minutes of the vote's conclusion, demanding a classified briefing on any Iranian back-channel communications within 48 hours. It will be investigated by the grand jury, which already has a subpoena outstanding for Wiles's communications records. And it will be investigated by the Supreme Court oral argument process, because the existence or non-existence of a genuine back channel directly affects the factual record on which the constitutional war powers question is being adjudicated. Let me now give you the specific legal implications of the 49-48 vote, because the outcome of a Senate vote on a war authorization resolution affects the legal landscape of the Supreme Court case in ways that the media is not explaining with sufficient precision. The Supreme Court's Youngstown framework, which Judge Holloway applied in her original blocking order, and which the appeals court affirmed unanimously, places presidential war powers in 3 zones based on whether Congress has authorized, is silent on, or has prohibited the presidential action in question. Before tonight's vote, the Iran operation existed in a Zone 3 posture because the War Powers Resolution affirmatively prohibits unauthorized military operations beyond 60 days. Tonight's vote adds a new dimension to that Zone 3 posture. The Senate voted on whether to authorize the operation. The authorization failed. Not because the Senate was unable to consider the question, not because procedural obstacles prevented a vote. The Senate voted, and the majority voted no. 49 senators representing a majority of the Senate's membership said that this operation does not have our authorization. That is not the same as the Senate having never considered the authorization question. That is the Senate having considered it and having declined. When the Supreme Court applies the Youngstown framework to a presidential military operation that has been directly put to a Senate vote and rejected by a majority of the Senate, the Zone 3 analysis becomes not merely statutory, but explicitly democratic. The president is not operating in the absence of congressional guidance. He is operating in the presence of congressional rejection. That is the strongest possible Zone 3 posture, and it is the posture the Solicitor General will now have to address in his Supreme Court brief, which is due in 8 days. 8 days. The Solicitor General's brief was already the most difficult legal document any Solicitor General has been asked to produce in living memory, given the unanimous appellate ruling. Tonight's Senate vote has made it harder. I want to address the administration's public framing of tonight's outcome because it will be aggressive, and it will be designed to obscure the actual significance of what happened. The White House will claim that the Senate rejected the Whitfield resolution. This is technically accurate. The resolution failed. The White House will claim that the Senate affirmed the president's authority to conduct the Iran operation. This is factually false. A failed authorization vote does not affirm presidential authority. It records congressional non-authorization. The distinction is not semantic. In Youngstown terms, affirmative non-authorization is categorically more limiting on presidential power than silence. The White House will claim that the 49-48 margin demonstrates that nearly half the Senate supports the operation. This inverts the arithmetic. 49 senators voted to require authorization. 48 voted against requiring it. The majority voted for the proposition that the operation requires authorization it does not currently have. The White House cannot change those numbers. It can spin the procedural outcome. It cannot change the democratic arithmetic. Let me give you the specific consequences for the 8 Republican senators I identified as convenience no votes because their political situation has changed materially since the roll call closed 20 minutes ago. Each of those 8 senators voted no on the calculation that the resolution was going to fail and that their no vote would be invisible in a comfortable margin. The actual margin is 49-48. Their no votes were not invisible. They were individually decisive. Any one of those 8 no votes, switched to yes, would have produced a tie that the vice president would have been required to break. In the current political environment, asking the vice president to cast a tie-breaking vote against a war authorization resolution would have been a political event of the first order, with consequences extending well beyond the Iran operation. Each of those 8 senators now knows that their no vote was individually decisive in preventing a tie. Their 2026 opponents know the same thing. The campaign advertisements are being written tonight in the offices of every Democratic challenger in those 8 states. The political calculation that made a convenience no vote seem safe 90 minutes ago is already obsolete. Let me show you the broader strategic picture because tonight's vote outcome, the 49-48 margin, the Collins defection, the 3 strategic absences, the Wiles back-channel calls, taken together they reveal something about the state of the Iran operation that the headline outcome obscures. The Iran operation has been running for 76 days. It has not produced Iranian capitulation or genuine negotiation. It has produced a 40 to 60% increase in global energy prices, 47,000 projected job losses in Michigan, 112,000 projected job losses in Ohio, 462 billion euros in documented European economic damage, a unanimous 11-0 appellate ruling against Presidential War Authority, an expanding federal grand jury investigation with 3 new areas of criminal exposure, a leaked Situation Room document showing Allied intelligence directly contradicting American assessments of Iranian negotiating intentions, 6 public Republican Senate defections, 2 additional Republican defections on a floor vote, 3 strategic Republican absences, and a chief of staff under federal subpoena making back-channel claims to wavering senators in the final 90 minutes before a war powers vote. That is the full picture of 76 days of the Iran strategy, not the headline. the full picture. I have spent decades analyzing the relationship between domestic political support and the sustainability of military operations. Every major American military operation in modern history that lacked durable domestic political support eventually ended, not because of military defeat, but because the political foundation eroded to the point where continuation became impossible, regardless of the operational situation. Vietnam ended that way. Iraq ended that way. The Iran operation is following the same erosion pattern. And tonight's 49-48 vote is a specific and measurable point on that erosion curve. The question is not whether the erosion will continue. It will continue. The question is how fast it will accelerate, and whether the acceleration will be fast enough to intersect with the Supreme Court oral arguments in 22 days in a way that changes the justice's assessment of the operation's democratic legitimacy. Let me give you the specific developments to watch in the next 72 hours because the vote has set off a chain of institutional reactions that will move faster than the media is currently tracking. In the next 24 hours, Senate Intelligence Committee Chair Warner will demand the classified briefing on the Iranian back channel that he publicly requested 20 minutes after the vote. The administration will either provide the briefing, which will reveal whether the back channel claim is real, or decline it, which will trigger a formal committee subpoena for the information. Either outcome advances the evidentiary record in ways that affect the grand jury investigation and the Supreme Court case simultaneously. In the next 48 hours, the 3 senators who were absent tonight will face an immediate demand from their constituents, their local press, and their Senate colleagues to explain their absence on the most consequential war powers vote in a generation. Unexplained absence on a roll call vote of this magnitude is not a sustainable political position. At least one of the 3 will be required to make a public statement about their position on the Iran authorization question, and that statement will be the next significant data point on the Republican Senate erosion curve. In the next 72 hours, the Solicitor General's office will be revising its Supreme Court brief to address the Senate vote outcome. The brief was already due in 8 days. It must now address the Youngstown implications of a Senate majority having voted for the proposition that the operation requires authorization. That revision, under an 8-day deadline, in the shadow of an expanding grand jury investigation and a unanimous appellate ruling, is the most pressured legal drafting exercise in recent American government history. Subscribe now. The 22 days between tonight's vote and the Supreme Court oral arguments are the most consequential 22 days in the Iran crisis, and every development in that window will shape what 5, 6, or 9 justices decide about the constitutional limits of presidential war power for the next generation. Tell me in the comments, do you believe the Wiles back channel claim is genuine? And if so, why has the administration been concealing it? Or is it a last-minute political fabrication that will become the next subject of a federal obstruction investigation? I read every comment. My next analysis covers exactly what the Senate Intelligence Committee will find when it demands the classified back-channel briefing, what genuine Iranian negotiating communications look like compared to fabricated ones, and why the 30-day timeline Wiles cited in her calls may be the most important unverified claim in the entire Iran crisis.